Shalom, shalom, shalom. My name is Nahum Yisrael, and today I'm going to do a video called Can We Keep Yahweh's Laws in Captivity? First, I want to start off by giving all honor, glory, and praise to Yahweh by saying Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. This video is going to be dealing with whether or not if we can keep Yahweh's laws here in captivity here in America. Now, dealing with whether or not if we can keep the law in captivity, the questions that I have for the people who say that we are not under the covenant of the law is this. Are we not supposed to keep any of Yahweh's laws in captivity? If the answer is no, are we not supposed to keep the law in Exodus chapter 22, verse 22? Let's go to Exodus chapter 22, verse 22. And Exodus chapter 22, verse 22, it reads, Ye shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. So would it be okay for us to abuse a child that does not have a father or a woman whose husband is dead? If the answer to that question is no, and that it's not okay to abuse them, then doesn't that mean you are supposed to keep this particular law? And if we are supposed to keep this law because we aren't supposed to be abusing widows, then what about other laws that Yahweh has? For example, can we keep the law in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3? Let's go there. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3. Let's see if we can keep this law here. In Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3, it reads, Thou shalt not eat any abominable thing. Can we eat any animal we want to? Can we even be cannibals and eat human beings? If the answer to this question is no, then doesn't that also mean we are supposed to keep this law in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3? Now, if we can keep these two particular laws that I just showed you, then what makes you think that we can't keep all the other laws? If we can keep these two laws, then what evidence do you have to prove that we can't keep all the rest of the laws in captivity? Now, if you can't keep the laws in captivity, then that technically means you can't really break the law. You're either keeping the law or not keeping it. There is no in between here. It is literally black or white. It is one or the other. If you drink water on a Sunday, you haven't broken the law because there isn't any law against drinking water on a Sunday. But if there was a law against drinking water on Sunday and you go and drink water on Sunday, then you just broke the law. Same thing applies to the Ten Commandments. If you can't keep the first commandment of not having any of the gods before Yahweh, then that means that if you go and worship false gods like JC, you are not really breaking that first commandment because you're not able to keep the law. Because how can you break the law if you can't keep the law to begin with? Especially if the law is done away with according to some people who use that verse out of Lamentations incorrectly, which is chapter 2, verse 9, which I'll talk about and deal with later on. Now, if I'm not supposed to keep the law in captivity, does that mean that if I don't commit adultery while living in captivity, that I'm breaking the law by not having sex with another man's wife? Should I go out and sleep with another man's wife and break that commandment in order to make sure that I don't break Yahweh's law by keeping the seventh commandment while I'm in captivity? If I'm not under the covenant of the law, does that mean I don't have to worry about keeping the seventh commandment and that I can be with another man's wife? Now, if you don't have sex with another man's wife, aren't you technically keeping the seventh commandment automatically? Aren't you technically keeping the law while in captivity by not having sex with another man's wife? Or is it that as long as you don't intentionally try to keep that particular commandment, then you're okay? So if you don't have sex with another man's wife, that's okay just as long as you didn't intentionally try to keep that commandment. But if you intentionally try to keep the seventh commandment while in captivity and don't have sex with another man's wife, then you are breaking the law because you intentionally kept that commandment while here in captivity. Now, the first thing that I want to do is prove that we are all still under the covenant of the law. Not the new covenant, but the old covenant that was written on tables of stone. In Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 1 through 20, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 29, and I'm going to read from verse 1 all the way to verse 20. So in Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 1, it reads, "These are the words of the covenant which Yahweh commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, beside the covenant which he made with them in Horeb. And Moses called unto all Israel, and said unto them, Ye have seen all that Yahweh did before your eyes in the land of Egypt unto Pharaoh, and unto all his servants, and unto all his land, the great temptations which thy eyes have seen, the signs, and those great miracles. Yet Yahweh hath not given you an heart to perceive, and eyes to see, and ears to hear, unto this day. And I have led you 40 years in the wilderness. Your clothes are now waxen old upon you, and thy shoe is now waxen old upon thy foot. Ye have not eaten bread, neither have ye drunk wine or strong drink, that ye might know that I am Yahweh your Elohim. And when ye came unto this place, Sihon the king of Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, came out against us unto battle, and we smote them. And we took their land, and gave it for an inheritance unto the Reubenites, and to the Gadites, and to the half tribe of Manasseh. Keep therefore the words of this covenant, and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do. Ye stand this day all of you before Yahweh your Elohim, your captains of your tribes, your elders, and your officers, with all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and thy stranger that is in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood unto the drawer of thy water, that thou shouldest enter into the covenant with Yahweh thy Elohim, and into his oath which Yahweh thy Elohim maketh with thee this day, that he may establish thee today for a people unto himself, and that he may be unto thee a Elohim, as he hath said unto thee, and as he hath sworn unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day before Yahweh our Elohim, and also with him that is not here with us this day. For ye know how we have dwelt in the land of Egypt, and how we came through the nations which ye passed by. And ye have seen their abominations and their idols, wood and stone, silver and gold, which were among them. Lest there should be among you man, or woman, or family, or tribe, whose heart turn away this day from Yahweh Elohim, to go and serve the gods of these nations, lest there should be among you a root that beareth gall and wormwood. And it come to pass, when he heareth the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace, though I walk in the imagination of my heart, to add drunkenness to thirst. Yahweh will not spare him, but then the anger of Yahweh and his jealousy shall smoke against that man, and all the curses that are written in this book shall lie upon him, and Yahweh shall blot out his name from under heaven. Now regarding verses 14 and 15, let me read those verses again. In verse 14 and 15 of chapter 29 of Deuteronomy, it reads, Neither with you only do I make this covenant and this oath, but with him that standeth here with us this day before Yahweh Elohim, and also with him that is not here with us this day. Regarding verses 14 and 15, what this is saying is that not only did Yahweh make the covenant of the law with the children of Israel thousands of years ago, or however long it was ago, but he also made it with future generations, which include the Hebrew Israelites who are alive today and are currently living in captivity. Now, some people may say, How do you know that verse 15 is talking about future generations? It could have been referring to some Hebrews who were alive back then at that time, but maybe there were some Hebrews who were living in different locations at the time this covenant was made. For example, there may have been some Hebrews living in Moab where Yah had made this covenant with them, but there may have been other Hebrews who were living in Kadesh at the time Yah had made that covenant with Israel and Moab. And those Hebrews who were instead living in Kadesh at that time did not hear the covenant being made with the Hebrews that were in Moab because those particular Hebrews were in Kadesh and not Moab. Well, this argument completely falls apart because if you read verse 1 of chapter 29, it clearly states that the children of Israel were in the land of Moab at the time this covenant was made. It did not say the Hebrews were living in both Moab, Sinai, Kadesh, and Seir. No, they were all together in one location. Also, in verse 2, it says that Moses called all Israel. It did not say Moses called most of Israel or some of Israel. No, it said he called all Israel. So if Moses called all Israel, then that means that all Israelites who were alive back then, thousands of years ago, who were living in the land of Moab when God made this covenant of the law with them, heard this covenant. Now, if this is not enough evidence to prove to you that all Israel was there in the land of Moab, then verses 10 and 11 will definitely prove it. So let me read verse 10 and 11 of chapter 29. Verse 10 it says, Ye stand this day all of you before Yahweh your Elohim, your captains, your tribes, your elders, your officers, with all the men of Israel, your little ones, your wives, and thy stranger that was in thy camp, from the hewer of thy wood until the drawer of thy water. So every single Hebrew Israelites was there on that day in Moab. Not a single person was left out. Not a single Hebrew was left out. All of them were there. The men, the women, the children, everybody was there. These two verses do not leave any Israelite out. All the Israelites were there, and since all Israel were there that day, then in verse 15 when it says, with him that is not here with us this day, it has to only be referring to future generations, which include myself and you all who are watching me and every other Hebrew who is alive today. And since it does refer to all of us, then that means that we are all still under the covenant of the law, regardless of whether we are in the wilderness, in our own land, or in captivity. For further proof to show you that we are still under the covenant of the law, if you continue reading from verse 15 of chapter 29 to verse 29 and read chapter 30 verses 1 through 8, it will establish that we are still under the covenant. Even though chapter 29 and chapter 30 of Deuteronomy are separated into different chapters, both chapters really should go both together. And if you read them together as just one whole chapter, both Deuteronomy 29 and 30, it will make more sense for what I'm about to explain. So, I am going to read Deuteronomy chapter 29, and I am going to start off in verse 25, and I'm going to read from 25 to 29, then I'm going to continue on reading from verses 1 of chapter 30 all the way to verse 8. So I'm pretty much going to read it like it's all one chapter instead of like saying, okay, I'm done reading verse 29 of chapter 29 Deuteronomy. Now I'm going to say chapter 30 verse 1. I'm just going to read it all together because it really should go all together. These two chapters really should not be separated at all. So I'm going to read Deuteronomy chapter 29 and I'm going to start the 25th verse. Then men shall say, because they have forsaken the covenant of Yahweh, Elohim of their fathers, which he made with them when he brought them forth out of the land of Egypt. For they went and served other gods, and worshipped them, gods whom they knew not, and whom he had not given unto them. And the anger of Yahweh was kindled against this land, to bring upon it all the curses that are written in this book. And Yahweh rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land, as it is this day. The secret, excuse me, the secret things belong unto Yahweh Elohim, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither Yahweh the Elohim have driven thee, and shall return unto Yahweh the Elohim, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that then Yahweh thy Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations, whither Yahweh thy Elohim hath scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will Yahweh the Elohim gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And Yahweh the Elohim will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do thee good, and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Yahweh thy Elohim will circumcise thine heart, and the heart of thy seed, to love Yahweh the Elohim with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. And Yahweh the Elohim will put all these curses upon thy enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And thou shalt return and obey the voice of Yahweh, and do all his commandments which I command thee this day. Even while in captivity, Yahweh expects us to keep his law. Yah knew that we were going to end up in captivity one day, as it is proven in Genesis chapter 15, verses 13 through 14. I'll go ahead and read that real quick. I'm just going to establish the fact that Yahweh knew one day that we were all going to end up in captivity one day, and that is proven in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13, which reads, And he said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. So, like I said, Yah knew that we were going to end up in captivity one day. So since Yah knew that we were going to sin against him and end up in captivity, this is the reason why Yah said in verse 1 and 2 of Deuteronomy chapter 30, that when all these blessings and curses are upon us while we are in captivity, if we return unto Yah and obey his voice, then Yah will turn your captivity and have compassion on you. Now keep in mind that the Hebrews were no longer in captivity when Yah said this to them at that time, but if they were to go into captivity, Yah wanted them to return unto him while they were in captivity. Now the word return is a vague word. What does it mean when it says return? Well, it could mean anything. Frankly, you could make it mean whatever you want it to mean. You could say that return means return back to keeping Yah's laws, or return back to worshiping Yah, or return back to keeping Yah's laws and worshiping Yah. But whatever the word return means, in addition to returning to Yah, we also have to obey the voice of Yah while we are in captivity. Now, how were these Hebrews supposed to obey Yah's voice if the people said, Let me not hear again the voice of Yah, as it stated in Exodus chapter 20, verses 18 through 19, and Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 15 through 16. So let's go there real quick. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20 and show where it talked about how the Israelites said, "We do not want to hear Yahweh's voice again." Alright, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 18, it reads, "And all the people saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off. And they said unto Moses, Speak thou with us, and we will hear, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die." Now I'm going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 18, and I'm going to read verses 15 and 16. Alright, Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 15. "Yahweh thy Elohim will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. Unto him ye shall hearken, according to all that thou desirest of Yahweh thy Elohim in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of Yahweh my Elohim, neither let me see this great fire any more, that I die not." So, these Hebrews did not want to hear Yahweh's voice anymore. But yet, Yahweh said he wanted them to obey his voice. Yahweh said he wanted the Israelites to obey his voice, to listen to him. Well, the only way for those Hebrews to have obeyed the voice of Yah while they were in captivity was that they would have had to have done the things that Yah had commanded them. And what has Yah been commanding those Hebrews that were alive back then from Exodus to Deuteronomy? Yah had been commanding them to keep his law because that was what his voice said. That was what his voice said. That is what came out of his mouth. So the only way for those Hebrews to have obeyed Yah's voice and all that Moses had commanded them, and keep in mind that whatever Moses commanded the children of Israel to do, it was from Yah, that they would have had to have kept the covenant of the law even while in captivity, according to Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 9. And let me read that again one more time. In Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 9, it reads, "Keep therefore the words of this covenant, and do them, that ye may prosper in all that ye do." So if these Hebrews do what Yah commands them while they are in captivity, then Yah will turn their captivity and they will return back to their land, as it states in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 3. And I'll read Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 3. "That then Yahweh will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations, whether Yahweh thy Elohim have scattered thee." Now you have to ask yourself the question, why would Yah put you into captivity? Well, the only reason why Yah would put you or our people into captivity is unless we sin against him, or in other words, we have broken his law, or in other words, we had broken the covenant of his law. So if Yah expected those Hebrews to keep his law while they were in captivity, even though they ended up breaking his covenant of the law, which Yah knew that they were going to end up doing, then how could he not expect us to keep his law while we ourselves are currently in captivity? Yah knew that we were going to end up breaking his covenant, which would result in us being put into captivity, because why else would you go into captivity unless you had broken the covenant of the law? Every single time we went into captivity, it has something to do with us breaking his covenant of the law, usually dealing with worshiping false gods, which is against Yah's laws. But continuing on, since Yah knew that we were going to end up in captivity for breaking his covenant, but yet he still expected those Hebrews back then to return unto him and obey his voice by doing everything that Yah commanded them, which is the reason why he said return to him. Then what makes you think that we of today can't keep the law while currently here in captivity, which is America? Now, for the people that say if you break the covenant of the law, you are no longer under the covenant of the law, then they have to explain why Yah would tell them to return and do all that He commanded them while they are in captivity, and the things that Yah commanded them was to keep His law. Now, some people may use Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 14 to prove that we can only keep the law in the promised land and not in captivity. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4. We're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 4, and I'm going to read verses 5 through 14. Okay. Alright, in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 5, it reads, Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes, and say, Surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who have Elohim so nigh to them, as Yahweh our Elohim is in all things that we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great, that have statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Only take heed to thyself, and keep thyself diligently, lest thou forget the things which thy eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life. But teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons, especially the day that thou stoodest before Yahweh thy Elohim in Horeb, when Yahweh said unto me, Gather me the people together, and I will make them hear my words, that they may learn to fear me all the days that they shall live upon the earth, and that they may teach their children. And ye came near and stood on the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire unto the midst of heaven, with darkness, clouds, and thick darkness. And Yahweh spake unto you out of the midst of the fire. Ye heard the voice of the words, but saw no similitude, only ye heard a voice. And he declared unto you his covenant, which he commanded you to perform, even 10 commandments, and he wrote them upon 2 tables of stone. And Yahweh commanded me at that time to teach you statutes and judgments, that ye might do them in the land whither ye go to possess it. Regarding verse 5 of chapter 4 in Deuteronomy, at best all you can say is, I don't know if you can keep the law in other places like in captivity, for instance. But for the people who say we can't keep the law in captivity, that is not what they are saying. Instead, they are saying you are absolutely not supposed to keep the law anywhere else except for in the land and maybe the wilderness too. In order to understand what a verse is saying, not only do you have to see what the verse is saying, but you also have to see what it is not saying. Now, if verses 5 and 14 of Deuteronomy 30 had the word only in them, then the people who say that we are not supposed to keep the law in captivity would be absolutely correct. Now I'm going to do a little experiment, and I'm going to add a word in verse 5, but I'm only going to do so in order to make a point. So I'm going to read verses 5, and I'm going to add the word only in there. Now keep in mind, there are people out there that are saying we cannot keep the law here in America. We can't keep it in captivity. We can only keep it in the promised land. That's their argument that they're making. So, was not true, by the way. But if it were true, then you would see the word only in verse 5. So let's do an experiment here. In verse 5 of Deuteronomy chapter 4, it reads, Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that on, ye should only do so in the land where ye go to possess it. See what I did right there? I'll do it again. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as Yahweh my Elohim commanded me, that ye should only do so in the land whether ye go to possess it. Now, if you have the word only in verse 5, then the people that say you can only keep Yahweh's laws in the promised land will be absolutely right. They will be absolutely correct. But that word only is not in verse 5. And so, because the word only is not in verse 5, you cannot say that we can only keep Yahweh's laws in the promised land. You can't say that at all. Again, at best you can say is, well, I don't know if we can keep Yahweh's laws in the promised land. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. But you definitely cannot say that we can't keep Yahweh's laws here in America and that you can only keep them in the promised land. Because again, the word only is not in verse 5. So we know we can keep Yahweh's law in the promised land if we were in the promised land. So, but we know that for sure, but we're not in the promised land. And I say that we can keep Yahweh's laws in captivity, in the wilderness, in the promised land. Pretty much we can keep the law anywhere in the world, wherever you're at, wherever we're scattered at. Now, there are testimonies in the scriptures that prove there were Hebrews that kept Yah's laws both outside the land and wilderness and while in captivity as well. The first testimony that I'm going to show is regarding Abraham. According to Genesis chapter 26 verses 1 through 5, let's go there. I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 26. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 5. Alright. Genesis chapter 26 verse 1, it reads, And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech king of the Philistines unto Gerar. And Yahweh appeared unto him, and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swore unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So this is saying that Yah had laws, statutes, and commandments in this world before he had ever wrote them down on a table of stone, and Abraham kept them. So if Abraham kept these, that means he kept them wherever he went. According to Genesis chapter 12, verses 10 through 14, Abraham went into Egypt. So let's go to Genesis chapter 12 and prove to you that Abraham had went into Egypt. I am going to start off at verse 10. Alright, so Genesis chapter 12, verse 10, and it reads, And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grievous in the land. And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. Therefore it shall come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they shall say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and my soul shall live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abram was coming to Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman that she was very fair. Now, if Abraham went into Egypt, the question that you have to ask yourself is if Abraham kept Yah's laws, statutes, and commandments, and he went down into Egypt, did he also keep Yah's laws while he was in Egypt, or did he decide to purposely not keep his laws because he was not in the promised land or the wilderness? I think that any person that has any common sense and is also honest with themselves, they will say, of course, Abraham kept Yahweh's laws while he was in Egypt. Now, some people may say that even though Abraham kept the laws, commandments, and statutes, Yah did not make a covenant with him regarding the covenant of the law, but he did make the covenant of the law with us. Okay, well, so what? Are you trying to say that if Abraham had started worshiping false gods that his father Terah had worshipped and not Yah, that somehow Abraham would have still been blessed just because he didn't make any type of agreement with Yah, saying, well, Yah, because you and I didn't make an agreement with each other regarding keeping your laws, it is perfectly okay with me to worship false gods, and I should still be blessed by you. Does that make any sense at all to you? Now, if this is not enough evidence for you to prove that we kept Yah's laws outside the promised land, then I have more testimonies to show you. There is another testimony that shows a Hebrew keeping Yah's laws not only outside the land, but even keeping it while in captivity. The Hebrew that I am referring to is Joseph. Now, Joseph was a captive in Egypt. Now, even though Joseph was in captivity, he still kept the law. And what law was that? It was the law regarding adultery. According to Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 through 23. Let's go there. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 39. And I am going to read verses 1 through 23. And I'm just trying to establish the fact that Joseph kept Yahweh's law, more specifically the law regarding adultery. He did not sleep with his master's wife, so he kept that law while he was a slave in Egypt. So in Genesis chapter 39, verse 1, it reads, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And Yahweh was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian. And his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of Yahweh was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not all he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person, and well favored. And it came to pass after these things, that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wanted not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against Elohim? Now keep in mind, notice what it says in verse 9. It says, how then can I do this great wickedness? What wickedness is it that he's talking about? He's talking about the wickedness of adultery, which is sin. So Joseph as I already stated, Joseph kept Yahweh's law, his law of not sleeping with another man's wife, because that's what's wicked, that's what's sin. And Joseph kept this particular law in Egypt while he was a slave, uh, while he was captive in Egypt as a slave. All right, continuing on, verse 10. And it came to pass, as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she said unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, and because Yahweh was with him, and that which he did, Yahweh made it to prosper. Now, now there may be some people that will say that Joseph was not a captive, but a slave, and that slavery and captivity are two different things. Even if that's true, I still have other testimonies that prove that we kept Yah's laws outside the promised land. There's another testimony that shows Hebrews keeping Yah's laws outside the land while in captivity and not being in the wilderness. These Hebrews are Sipra and Puah. These Hebrew women were alive during the time when the children of Israel were slaves to the Egyptians. These two women were ordered to kill/murder Hebrew babies, but they kept Yah's law of thou shalt not murder and did not kill/murder the Hebrew babies. This can be found in Exodus chapter 1, verses 8 through 20. So let's go to Exodus chapter 1. And I'm going to start off in verse 8 and read all the way to verse 20. So Exodus chapter 1, verse 8, it reads, Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph, and he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Python and Ramesses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew, and they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with the regard. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar, and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with regard. And the king of Egypt spake to the Hebrew midwives, of which the name of the one was Sipra, and the name of the other Puah. And he said, When ye do the office of a midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill him, but if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared Elohim, and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. And the king of Egypt called for the midwives, and said unto them, Why have ye done this thing, and have saved the men children alive? And and the midwives said unto Pharaoh, Because the Hebrew women are not as the Egyptian women, for they are lively, and are delivered ere the midwives come in unto them. Therefore Elohim dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and waxed very mighty. So these two women, these two Hebrew midwives, the Pharaoh wanted these two women to murder those Hebrew babies, but they didn't do that at all. They kept Yahweh's law of thou shalt not murder. They did not kill those Hebrew babies, and because they kept Yahweh's law, Yahweh ended up rewarding them, as it states in verse 20. Therefore Yahweh dealt well with the midwives. So Yahweh ended up blessing those Hebrew women because they had kept Yahweh's law. And by the way, they were not in the promised land. They were in Egypt, and they were all slaves. They were all captive in Egypt, but yet those two women still kept Yahweh's laws, even though they were not in the promised land. They were in Egypt. Now, the last testimony that I'm going to show is regarding Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. According to Daniel chapter 3, let's go there. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 3. And if you read the entire chapter, which I'm not going to do because it is kind of long, but if you read all the chapter 3 in Daniel, you'll find that these three Hebrew men, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they also kept Yahweh's law while they were captive in Babylon, while they were slaves in Babylon. And the commandment and the particular law that they kept was the second commandment, which is, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. They kept that law while they were being held as slaves in Babylon. So I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but I'm just going to skip around just to get to the main point. But I'll go ahead and start off at verse 1 of Daniel chapter 3. And it reads, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Alright, let me skip on down to verse 5. That at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worship it, shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Alright, let's skip on down to verse 12. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Then they brought these men before the king. Alright, skip on down to verse 17. If it be so, our Elohim, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visions was changed against Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore he spake, and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be heated. Alright, skip on down to verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the son of Elohim. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake, and said, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, ye servants of the Most High Elohim, come forth, and come hither. Then Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah came forth of the midst of the fire. Skip on out to verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the Elohim of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other Elohim that can deliver after this sword. Then the king promoted Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah in the province of Babylon. Now these 3 men were in captivity in Babylon, and the reason why they were in Babylon was because the children of Israel had sinned against Yahweh. How did they sin? They sinned by breaking the covenant of the law, whether that had been due to worshiping false gods, which is against Yah's law, or breaking other laws that Yahweh had. Now, if the covenant of the law was broken and Hebrews are not allowed to or able to keep the law in captivity, then why would Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah keep Yahweh's second commandment according to Exodus chapter 20 verses 4 through 5? So let's go to Exodus chapter 20. And I'm going to read verse 4 and 5. Exodus chapter 20 verse 4, it reads, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I Yahweh thy Elohim am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquities of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Now, if you go back to Daniel chapter 3, and if you read verse 6 of Daniel chapter 3, verse 6 it says, And whoso falleth not down and worship it, shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now, if you hold that page, if you hold Daniel chapter 3, verse 6, hold that, and then switch right back to Exodus chapter 5. Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, you'll notice something very interesting. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, it says, Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them. So in Daniel chapter 3, verse 6, it says, Whoso falleth not down and worship it. And Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, it says, Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them. These 3 Hebrew men, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, they kept Yahweh's second commandment. And part of Yahweh's second commandment is not bowing down and worshiping false gods, which is what Nebuchadnezzar wanted everybody in Babylon to do, including these 3 Hebrew men. Nebuchadnezzar wanted everybody to do that, but these 3 Hebrew men, they didn't do that. They kept Yahweh's laws while they were in Babylon. They kept Yahweh's second commandment, and they didn't bow down to that image that Nebuchadnezzar made, that golden image, and they didn't worship it. So for all the people that say, "Oh, you don't have to worry about keeping Yahweh's law and in captivity," well, if that's true, then explain to me why would these three Hebrew men keep Yahweh's second commandment and not worship and not fall down and worship that golden image? Why did they keep that second commandment if you're not supposed to keep Yahweh's laws in captivity, or if you're not able to keep Yahweh's law in captivity? Why didn't they just fall down and worship that golden image? I'll tell you the reason why they didn't fall down and worship that golden image, because they know that they're supposed to keep Yahweh's law no matter wherever you're at, whether you're in the promised land, whether you're in the wilderness, or whether you're in captivity. That's why they kept Yahweh's commandment. That's why they did not fall down and worship that golden image. And because they didn't worship that golden image, Yahweh ended up blessing them by sending his angel into that fiery furnace that they were cast into, and Yahweh saved them. Now, for the people out there that say we can't keep law in America because we're in captivity due to breaking the covenant of the law, they will instead say that we only have to do three things here in America. Those three things are fear Yah, depart from evil, and have integrity. I'll deal with the having integrity and fearing Yah part later. But first I'll deal with the departing from evil part. In order to depart from evil, you have to know what the definition of evil is. So I'm going to look up the word evil in the Webster's 2 New Riverside Pocket Dictionary, which is this right here. I'm going to look up the word evil. And while I'm looking up the word evil, I just want to state and say that for the people that say that we don't have to keep Yahweh's law, we just have to do three things, and that's just fear Yahweh, have integrity, and depart from evil. That's what people will say for the ones that um those are the things that people will say. Let me rephrase that. For the people that say that we don't have to keep Yahweh's laws in captivity, we just have to do those three things, and that's just fear Yahweh, depart from evil, and have integrity. That's what they would say. So looking up the word evil, let's find out what that is. Alright, according to this definition, it says evil is wicked, injurious, harmful, wickedness. Okay. Now let's look up evil in another dictionary. This is the American Heritage School Dictionary, which is this right here. So let's look up the word evil. And by the way, I'm going to prove that you need to do more than just depart from evil and fear Yahweh and have integrity. I'm going to prove that you need to do more than just that. I'm going to prove that you need to do all of the above. Of course, you need to fear Yahweh, obviously, and you do need to depart from evil, and it's important to have integrity, but you also have to keep Yahweh's law as well. It all goes together. It's not separate. Here we go. Alright, according to this definition, evil, it is morally bad or wrong, wicked, sinful, causing harm, disaster, misfortune, harmful, indicating future misfortune, angry or spiteful, wickedness, evil deeds, acts, etc. Okay. Now that we know what the definition of evil is, let's find out what the scriptures says evil is. According to the scriptures, it is against Yah's law to hate your brother. This is proven in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17. So let's go to Leviticus chapter 19, I'm going to read the 17th verse. Okay, so in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17, it reads, Thou shalt not hate thy brother in thy heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Now, since it is against the law to hate your brother, the question then becomes, is this evil? If it is evil, which it is, by the way, and I'm going to prove that, how else would you depart from evil unless you keep Yah's law, which is not hating your brother? To show you that it is evil to hate your brother, I'm going to show you two scriptures, which are Genesis chapter 37, verses 3 through 4, and Genesis chapter 50, verse 19 through 20. So I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 37, and I am going to prove that it is evil to hate your brother. Because Yah has a law that says you can't hate your brother. I'm going to prove that hating your brother is an evil thing. And that the only way to depart from evil is to keep Yahweh's law of not hating your brother. Okay, so in Genesis chapter 37, verse 3, it reads, Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him, and could not speak peaceably unto him. Now I'm going to go to Genesis chapter 50, and I'm going to read verses 19 and 20. So Genesis chapter 50, verse 19, it reads, And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for am I in the place of Elohim? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but Elohim meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. So right here, Joseph was saying that it was evil for his brothers to hate him. So for the people that say all you have to do is depart from evil and you don't have to worry about keeping the law, well, the only way to depart from evil, at least when it comes to not hating your brother, is to keep Yah's law according to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 17. And by keeping this law, you will automatically be departing from evil. Now, if this evidence is not sufficient enough for you to believe that hating your brother is an evil thing to do, then here is other evidence to show you that making graven images is an evil thing to do. According to Yah's second commandment, we cannot make graven images. This is proven in Exodus chapter 20, verse 4. I already read that earlier, so I'm not going to read it again. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and read it again. It's a short verse anyway. So Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, it reads, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. So Yah has a law that says we cannot make graven images. Not only is it against Yah's law to make graven images, but it is an evil thing to make graven images. This is proven in 1 Kings chapter 14, verses 7 through 9. So I'm going to go to 1 Kings chapter 14. And I'm going to prove that it is an evil thing to make graven images. 1 Kings chapter 14. And I'm going to read from verse 7 through 9. So starting at verse 7, it reads, Go, tell Jeroboam, Thus saith Yahweh Elohim of Israel, For as much as I exalted thee from among the people, and made thee prince over my people Israel, and rent the kingdom away from the house of David, and gave it thee, and yet thou hast not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments, and who followed me with all his heart, to do that only which was right in my eyes, but hast done evil above all that were before thee, for thou hast gone and made thee other gods and molten images to provoke me to anger, and hast cast me behind thy back. So, as I read earlier in Exodus chapter 20, verse 4, when it says, Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images, that is an evil thing to do. And that's proven in verse 9 when Yahweh says, but has done, when Yahweh says in verse 9 of 1 Kings chapter 14, but has done evil above all that were before thee, for thou hast gone and made thee other gods. That was an evil thing for Jeroboam to have done. It is evil to make graven images. So once again, to make the point, if it is evil to make graven images, and Yah has a law that says don't make graven images, then the only way to depart from evil would be to keep Yah's law, more specifically his second commandment. Other scriptures that talk about what is evil include Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 16 through 19. Let's go there real quick. We're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 19. And I'm going to start off at verse 16 and read to 19. Deuteronomy chapter 19, verse 16, it reads, If a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before Yahweh, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquisition, and, behold, if the witness be a false witness, and have testified falsely against his brother, then shall ye do so unto him, as he hath thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil away from among you. So for the people out there that say all you have to do is just depart from evil, well, how would you depart? How would you depart from this particular evil? That what it says in verse 19. You know, if there's a false witness and somebody's testifying against you and they're a false witness, how would you depart from this particular kind of evil here in America? That's the question that I have for them. Another verse that talks about what evil is, other scriptures that talk about what evil is, and also include Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 22 through 24. So let's go there. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22, it reads, If a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. If a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed unto a husband, and a man find her in the city, and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones that they die, the damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he hath humbled his neighbor's wife. So shalt thou put evil from among you. So I ask the question again, for those people that say all you have to do is depart from evil, how would you depart from this particular kind of evil, particularly in verse 22 where it says, if a man be found lying with a woman married to a husband, then they shall both of them die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. So shalt thou put away evil from Israel. So it is evil for a man to have sex with a married woman. So if you want to depart from evil, then the best way to do that will be to keep this particular law, and that is to not have sex with another man's wife, or in other words, keep Yahweh's commandment of thou shalt not commit adultery. So the only way that you can depart from evil is to keep Yahweh's law. If you keep Yahweh's laws, then you will automatically depart from evil. Again, other scriptures that talk about what evil is also include Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 7. So let's go there. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 7, it reads, if a man be found stealing any of his brethren of the children of Israel, and maketh merchandise of him, or selleth him, then that thief shall die, and thou shalt put evil away from among you. So again, I've already asked it before, but I'll ask it again. How would you depart from evil regarding verse 7? Well, by the way, what verse 7 is saying, if somebody ends up kidnapping a person and selling them, then that person has to die. So in order to keep this particular law is to, not kidnap anybody, not kidnap your fellow Hebrew brothers. And if you don't go around kidnapping people, then you'll automatically depart from evil. So if you keep Yahweh's law of, not stealing, your brother, or in other words, don't kidnap your brethren, then you would automatically be departing from evil. So, yeah, again, if you want to depart from evil, just keep Yahweh's law. And again, I asked the question for those people out there that say, oh, all you have to do is depart from evil. Okay, well, if all you have to do is depart from evil, then why not just keep Yahweh's law here in America? Why not just keep his law in captivity? Because if you keep the law, again, you will automatically be departing from evil. Okay, and one more scripture where it talks about what evil is. It includes 2 Kings chapter 17, and it'll be verses 13 through 17. So 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 13, it reads, Yet Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Notwithstanding they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in Yahweh their Elohim. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant which he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them, and they followed vanity, and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom Yahweh had charged them, that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served false deity. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke him to anger. Regarding verse 17, it is saying that divination, enchantments, and having your children be cremated is evil, and God has laws dealing with these three things. These laws can be found in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26, and Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 11. So let's go to, and if you hold this page, if you hold 2 Kings chapter 17, I'm going to go right back to it in order to make a point. If you hold that page, and then go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 26, I am going to prove to you that divination, enchantments, having your children pass through the fire, which is cremation, by the way. That all that is an evil thing to do, and Yahweh has laws against those types of things. So Leviticus chapter 19 verse 26, it reads, "Ye shall not eat anything with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment nor observe times." And now if you go to Deuteronomy chapter 18, and I'm going to read verses 10 and 11. Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 10, it reads, "There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer." So we'll skip right back to 2 Kings chapter 17. And if you go to verse 17 of this chapter, I'll read it again. It says, "And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke him to anger." Now notice it has the word evil in verse 17. It says, "and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh." What is this evil that Yahweh is talking about? Well, the evil that he's talking about is using divination, it's using enchantments, and it's having, your sons or daughters pass through the fire, which again, Yahweh has laws against, which I've already read it, which are in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 and 11. So, if you want to depart from evil, as for the people out there that say, hey, all you have to do is just depart from evil. Well, if you want to depart from evil, then the best thing that you can do is keep Yahweh's laws, especially laws that say that don't use enchantments, don't use divination, don't have your sons and daughters pass through the fire. If you keep those laws, then you will automatically be departing from evil. Because like I've already said, it's evil to use enchantments and divination and have your kids pass through the fire. Now, if you do not believe that these three things are evil, here is evidence to prove that. According to 2 Kings chapter 21, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 21. And I'm just going to again further prove that divination, enchantments, having your kids pass through the fire, that all that is evil. So I'm going to go to 2 Kings chapter 2. 2 Kings chapter 21. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. Starting at verse 1, it reads, "Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, after the abominations of the heathen, whom Yahweh cast out before the children of Israel. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for false deity, and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. And he built altars in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh said, In Jerusalem will I put my name. And he built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of Yahweh. And he made his son pass through the fire, and observed times, and used enchantments, and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He wrought much wickedness in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke him to anger." So again, I'm just further proving that, using enchantments, dealing with the wizards, dealing with familiar spirits, all that stuff, all of that is evil, and Yahweh has laws against that, as I've read in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10 through 11. "There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or or that use divination, or an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. If you kept this law right here, then Manasseh, the king at that time, he would have departed from evil. If Jeroboam had kept of that law, he would have departed from evil. But Jeroboam and Manasseh, those rulers, those kings, they did not keep that law. Instead, they went after familiar spirits. They had their sons pass through the fire. They did all those abominations that were talked about here in Kings, in the book of Kings. Now, if these three things are evil and Yah has laws against it, then the only way to depart from evil would be to keep Yah's laws even while in captivity, because if you keep the law, then you will automatically depart from evil, because the whole purpose of law is to depart from evil. Why else would Yah create laws to begin with other than for us to not be evil and do evil things? And I also want to go to first. I'm not sorry. I want to go to Psalms dealing with evil. I'm still dealing with departing from evil. I'm going to go to Psalms chapter 119. And I'm going to go to verse 115. So in Psalms chapter 119, verse 115, it reads, "Depart from me, ye evildoers, for I will keep the commandments of my Elohim." Now, for the people out there that say all you have to do is just depart from evil, well, from what verse 115 is telling me is that in order to depart from evil, you have to keep Yahweh's commandments. And if you end up keeping his commandments, then you'll automatically be departing from evil. As it says, "Depart from me, ye evildoers." So it's telling those evildoers, "Hey, get away from me, for I am going to keep the commandments of my Elohim." So anybody that keeps Yahweh's commandments, they are departing from evil. They are departing from evildoers. But the people who are evildoers, they don't keep the commandments. They don't keep Yahweh's law. So again, in order to depart from evil, you have to keep the law, you have to keep the commandments, you have to keep the statutes and, testimony, ordinances, all that in order to depart from evil. There's one last thing that I want to show in regards to departing from evil. For the people out there that either say we can't keep the law in captivity or that we shouldn't, my question for them is, do they keep the Sabbath day according to Exodus chapter 20, verse 8? So let's go to Exodus chapter 20. Verse 8, Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, it reads, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." If the answer to that question is no, then my next question is, would it be evil to buy and sell on the Sabbath day? The reason why I ask this question is because of what it says in Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 through 18, and Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31. So let's go to Nehemiah chapter 13. Okay, in Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 15, it reads, "In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves, and ladding asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our Elohim bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. So, before I go to chapter 10, verse 31, I just want to establish that what this is saying is that it is an evil thing to do to sell on the Sabbath day. And if you sell on the Sabbath day, you're profaning the Sabbath. That's what this is talking about. So let's now go to Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31. And this is just going to further establish that not only is it wrong to sell on the Sabbath day, but it's also wrong to buy on the Sabbath day as well. It's wrong. It's evil to buy and sell on the Sabbath day. So Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 31, it reads, and if the people of the land bring ware or any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and that we would leave the seventh year and the exaction of every debt. So this is saying that it is evil to buy and sell on the Sabbath day, and if it is evil, how would you be able to depart? How would you be able to depart from this evil unless you kept the Sabbath day holy by not buying or selling on the Sabbath day? Buying and selling on the Sabbath day is an evil thing to do, and the only way to depart from this evil is to not buy and sell on the Sabbath day. Now, if you don't buy and sell on the Sabbath day, guess what you're doing? You're keeping the Sabbath day holy by not buying or selling, which inadvertently means you're keeping Yah's law. Now, if it is evil to buy and sell on the Sabbath, and by buying and selling on the Sabbath means that you are profaning it, then what else could profane the Sabbath that could be evil? Could you profane the Sabbath day itself by not keeping it at all? And if you profane it by not keeping it, aren't you doing an evil thing by not keeping the Sabbath? Now, while I'm on the topic of the Sabbath day, I have a question for the people that say we can't keep the law in America because we broke the covenant of the law. My question is, how many covenants did Yah make with the children of Israel? My next question would be, of the number of covenants that Yah made with Israel, is the Sabbath day one of those covenants? The answer to that question is yes. Yah made a covenant with Israel, and that covenant is called the covenant of the Sabbath day. This is proven in Exodus chapter 31, verses 12 through 17. So let's go to Exodus chapter 31. And I'm going to read verses 12 through 17. So Exodus chapter 31, verse 12, it reads, and Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am Yahweh that do sanctify you. Ye shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Every one that defile it shall surely be put to death, for whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to Yahweh. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. Now, since Yah made a covenant of the Sabbath day with Israel, my question is, are we still under that covenant? I would argue yes, we are, and here's why. Some people say that because we broke the covenant of the law, we are no longer under the covenant of the law, and therefore we can't keep the law in captivity. Let's just say, for the sake of argument's sake, that that is true. Where in the scriptures does it say that Israel broke the covenant of the Sabbath day? I'll give you the answer. There is nowhere in the scriptures where it says anything at all about Israel breaking the covenant of the Sabbath day. So if Israel did not break the covenant of the Sabbath day, then doesn't that mean we are still under this particular covenant? And if we are still under this covenant, shouldn't we all be keeping the Sabbath day? Should we all be keeping the Sabbath day even in captivity? Now, some people may make the argument and say that the Sabbath is part of the law of the covenant, and therefore we still can't keep the Sabbath day. Now, even though the law of the covenant does include the Sabbath day, the covenant of the Sabbath is still a completely separate covenant all by itself. Yah has multiple covenants, and one of those covenants is the covenant of the law, and another one of those covenants is the Sabbath day. So the argument of saying that because the law of the covenant includes the Sabbath day, and therefore we don't have to keep the Sabbath day, does not work. Now, the last argument that people may make is to say that because there were Hebrews who violated the Sabbath day, the covenant of the Sabbath day is broken, and therefore we don't have to keep the Sabbath in America. Well, that argument doesn't work either, and for two reasons. One, there is nowhere in the scriptures where it says that Israel broke the covenant of the Sabbath day, let alone anywhere where it says that Yah said we broke it. You can read plenty of places where Yah said that Israel broke the covenant of the law, but you will never read where Yah said that Israel broke the covenant of the Sabbath day. I should know because I've tried searching the scriptures for it and I can't find it. And finally, the second reason is because even if there were some Hebrews who violated the Sabbath day, whether in the wilderness, as it talked about in Numbers chapter 15, verses 32 through 36, regarding the man who picked up sticks on the Sabbath day, or in the Holy Land, as it talked about in Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 15 through 22, regarding people buying and selling on the Sabbath day, that still does not mean we are no longer under the covenant of the Sabbath day. David broke one of Yahweh's commandments, which was the one concerning adultery. So you could say that David broke the covenant of the law. Does that mean that David therefore was no longer under the law and he could therefore continue committing adultery and commit other iniquities like worshiping false gods? Just because David committed a sin by breaking one of Yahweh's laws does not mean that he was no longer under the covenant of the law anymore, or that the rest of the Hebrews in Israel were no longer under it, because they were all still under it, including David. Therefore, just because there were some Hebrews in the scriptures that violated the Sabbath day does not mean that we of today are no longer under the covenant of the Sabbath day, because we still are. The next thing that I want to talk about now is the fear of Yah. This is for the people that say we don't have to keep the law in captivity, but instead we just have to have integrity, depart from evil, and fear Yah. If we just have to fear Yah, then they are going to have to explain 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 29 through 41. So let's go there. We're going to go to 2 Kings And we're going to go to chapter 17. And I'm going to read verses 29 through 41. So in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 29, it reads, Howbeit every nation made gods of their own, and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made false deity, and the men of Cuth made false deity, and the men of Hamath made false deity, and the Avites made false deity and false deity, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire to false deity and false deity, the gods of Sepharvaim. So they feared Yahweh, and made unto themselves of the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared Yahweh, and served their own gods, after the manner of the nations whom they carried away from thence. Unto this day they do after the former manners. They fear not Yahweh, neither do they after their statutes, or after their ordinances, or after the law and commandment which Yahweh commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom Yahweh had made a covenant, and charged them, saying, Ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But Yahweh, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, him shall ye fear, and him shall ye worship, and to him shall ye do sacrifice. And the statutes, and the ordinances, and the law, and the commandment which he wrote for you, ye shall observe to do forevermore, and ye shall not fear other gods. And the covenant that I have made with you ye shall not forget, neither shall ye fear other gods. But Yahweh your Elohim ye shall fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. Howbeit they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. So these nations feared Yahweh, and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day. So what this is saying is that you have these different nations, uh, like um like the men of Babylon, and the Avites, all these different nations that it talks about in verses 30 and 31. These different nations are making gods of their own, and while they're making gods of their own, they're they're fearing Yahweh. They fear Yahweh, but yet they're still making these false gods. So for the people out there that say that all you have to do is just fear Yahweh, well, you have these nations that are fearing Yahweh, but yet they're still making false gods. So do you think that just because these nations feared Yahweh, but yet they're still making false gods, that somehow Yahweh is going to end up blessing these nations? That he's going to, you know, have these nations make it to the promised land with us Hebrews? You think Yahweh is going to end up blessing them, even though they're worshiping false gods? I think not. Okay, I think we all know that these people are not going to be blessed. Yahweh's not going to end up blessing them, because they're making false gods and they're worshiping these false gods, even though they may be fearing Yahweh. So when you read from verse 29 all the way to verse 41, but specifically verse 41, what this is saying is that you have to do more than just fear Yahweh. You also have to obey his laws. You have to keep his commandments. You have to have integrity. Yes, you do have to fear him. Yes, you do have to depart from evil. Yes, you have to do all of the above. It's more than just fearing Yahweh, because if you just feared Yahweh, if all you had to do was just fear Yahweh, well, then you could make false gods like these nations did. You can make a false god like a JC, and have a picture of JC in your house and worship JC if you want to, but just as long as you fear Yahweh, that's okay for you to worship JC. No, 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 no. That's not how it works. You have to do more than just fear Yahweh. You have to keep his commandments as well. So according to what this is saying, you have to do more than just fear Yahweh, because fearing Yah is not enough, at least not in Yah's eyes. These other nations feared Yah, but still worshiped other gods. Do you think Yahweh is going to give them a pass and consider them righteous? I don't think so. So again, the question that I have for the people out there that say all you have to do is fear Yahweh, my question to them is, how do you explain 2 Kings chapter 17 verses 29 through 41, but especially verse 41? How do you explain that verse 41 when it says, "So these nations feared Yahweh and served their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as did their fathers, so do they unto this day." They're going to have to explain that verse to me, as well as verses 29 through 41, but especially verse 41. So the people out there that just say all you have to do is just fear Yahweh. The next thing that I want to bring up in regards to the fear of Yah is what it says in Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 6. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 8. Okay, we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 6, and it reads, "Therefore thou shalt keep the commandments of Yahweh thy Elohim, to walk in his ways, and to fear him." Now notice, it says, not only does it say to fear Yahweh, but it also says that we have to keep his commandments and walk in his ways. So for the people out there that say that all you have to do is just fear Yahweh, well, according to this verse, you have to do more than just fear Yahweh. You have to keep his commandments, and you have to walk in his ways, and you have to fear him. Now notice what it does not say. It does not say this: "Therefore thou shalt keep the commandments of Yahweh thy Elohim," or you can walk in his ways, or you can fear him. No, you will not see the word "or" in verse 6 at all. Instead, you will see the word "and." What does the word "and" mean? "And" means in addition to. So not only do you have to fear Yahweh, but you also have to walk in his ways, and you have to keep his commandments. If all we have to do is fear Yah, depart from evil, and have integrity, then explain to me why it says we have to keep Yah's commandments, walk in his ways, and fear him. It seems to me that we have to do more than just fear Yah, but we also have to keep his law as well. This is further proven in Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12 through 13. So let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 10, and we're going to read verses 12 and 13. So Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse 12, it reads, "And now, Israel, what doth Yahweh thy Elohim require of thee, but to fear Yahweh thy Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yahweh thy Elohim with all thine heart, with all thy soul, to keep the commandments of Yahweh, and his statutes, which I command thee this day." So you'll notice one of the first things in verse 12 when it says, "Israel, what does Yahweh require of you?" It requires you to fear Yahweh. But if you'll notice, it has a comma. It says, "But to fear Yahweh the Elohim, comma, to walk in all his ways, comma, and to love him, comma, and to serve Yahweh with all thy heart, with all thy heart, with all thy soul, comma, to keep his commandments, comma, and his statutes." Okay, so all of this goes together. You can't just fear Yahweh and then forget about loving him, forget about walking in his ways, forget about his commandments, forget about his statutes, forget those things, just fear him. No, 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 no. As I said before, all this goes together. You have to fear him. You have to love him. You have to keep his commandments. You have to walk in his ways. You have to keep his statutes. All of this goes together. That's why it says, what do Yahweh require of thee? He requires you to do all of these things. He doesn't just require you to, only fear him and that's it. Don't worry about the other stuff. No, he requires you to do all of this stuff, which is to fear him, which is to keep his commandments, which is to love him, which is to walk in his ways. He requires you to do all of this stuff. Notice that it did not say anywhere in these verses, fear Yahweh wherever you're at in the world, but keep my commandments and statutes only in the promised land. No, 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 no. It did not say that at all. Instead, what it did say was fear Yah, keep his commandments and statutes, point blank, period. So in verses 12 of Deuteronomy chapter 10, it says to fear Yahweh, keep his commandments and his statutes. So you have to do everything, all of those things, not not one of those things, not two of those things, not three of those things, but all of those things. You have to fear him, love him, walk in his ways, keep his commandments, keep his statutes. You have to do all of that. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is having integrity. For those that say we don't have to keep the law in captivity, but we just have to do three things, and the last one is to have integrity, we first have to know what integrity means. Here is one definition of the word integrity. I am going to go on Google and I'm going to look up the definition of integrity. So according to Google, the definition of integrity is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles, moral uprightness. Notice that this definition has the word moral in it. What are morals? Morals are what are right. Morals are what are right and wrong. It is what is good and bad. If you have morals, then you are going to do what is right and you won't do anything that is evil or unrighteous. Also, the definition has the word honest in it. People who are moral are honest, and honest people have morals. Integrity, honesty, morality, morals, all these words are similar to one another. Now, dealing with Yah's law, you have to ask yourself, are Yah's laws moral? Do his laws deal with being honest and wanting people to be honest with one another and not dishonest? Do people who keep Yah's laws have integrity? Moses kept Yah's law. Did he have integrity or did he not have any integrity? Other prophets like Samuel, Isaiah, and Jeremiah, they kept Yah's laws. Did they have integrity as well, or did they not have any integrity? We all know what the answers to these questions are. Anybody with any common sense will know that if you keep Yah's law, you will of course have integrity. Now, some people might say that the reason why you don't have to keep the law, but just have integrity, is because of what First Kings verses 9, First Kings chapter 9 verse 4 says. So let's read that. We're going to go to First Kings chapter 9 verse 4. And this is for the people that say that all you have to do is just have integrity, but don't worry about keeping the law in captivity. And they'll probably use this verse right here in chapter 9 of First Kings. And it reads, and if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart and in uprightness, to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments. So this is Yahweh talking to Solomon, and he says to Solomon, if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked, in integrity of heart. The people will say, oh, well, all you have to do is have integrity. Because that's what, Yahweh told Solomon. If you just have integrity like David did, then you're good to go. But what they won't include, if you'll read further in verse 4, it also says, and will keep my statutes and my judgments. So not only did Solomon have to have integrity, but he also had to keep the statutes and the judgments. Okay? So it's not just having integrity. It's not just fearing Yahweh. It's not just departing from evil. It's also keeping the statutes and the judgments and the commandments and the precepts and testimonies and ordinances. All this stuff goes together. Okay? The last thing that I will say in regards to fearing Yahweh, departing from evil, and having integrity is this. If you are someone who just says that all you need to do is keep the law and don't worry about having integrity, fearing Yah, and departing from evil, then you are just as wrong as someone who says all you need to do is have integrity, fear Yah, depart from evil, and don't worry about keeping the law. All of this goes together, and you can't have one without the other. Now I'm going to start getting into some of the arguments and excuses people may use when trying not to keep the law in captivity. One argument that people may use is that they will say we can't keep the law in a polluted land, and since America is obviously a polluted land, we therefore can't keep the law here in captivity. Well, if we really can't keep the law in a polluted land, then explain to me how the land of Israel was polluted before our forefathers even went into the land, and yet we still kept the law. Not only was the promised land polluted before we went in, but it was also polluted while we were there and already settled in. To prove to you that the land was polluted before our forefathers went in, all you have to do is go to Leviticus chapter 18, verses 24 through 27. So let's go to Leviticus chapter 18, and I'm going to read verses 24 through 27. So Leviticus chapter 18, verse 24, it reads, Defile not ye yourselves in any of these things, for in all these the nations are defiled, which I cast out before you, and the land is defiled. Therefore I do visit the iniquity thereof upon it, and the land itself vomited out her inhabitants. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, neither any of your own nation, nor any stranger that sojourneth among you. For all these abominations have the men of the land done, which were before you, and the land is defiled. So what this is saying is that before our forefathers had went into the promised land had been defiled by the people that were there before us, before our forefathers, and they defiled the land by committing all sorts of abominations, and to show you proof that the land was also defiled after we had already settled in, all you have to do is go to Psalms chapter 106, verses 37 through 38, and Ezekiel chapter 36, verses 17 through 18. So now I've already showed you that here in Leviticus chapter 18, verse 24 through 27, that the land was defiled before we went in. Now I'm going to prove that the land was defiled while we were already settled in the land. So I'm going to go to Psalms chapter 106. Again, I'm finna prove that the land was defiled while we were there ourselves. So in Psalms chapter 106, verse 37, it reads, Yea, they sacrificed their sons and their daughters unto devils, and shed innocent blood. even the blood of their sons and of their daughters, whom they sacrificed unto the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with blood. So that's proof right there to show that we ourselves ended up defiling the promised land. We ended up polluting the promised land while we were settled therein. Now I'm going to go to Ezekiel chapter 36 for further proof to show to you that we ourselves ended up polluting the land. We ended up defiling the land while we were living there. So in Exodus chapter 36 verse 17 and 18 it reads, Son of man, when the house of Israel dwelt in their own land, they defiled it by their own way and by their doings. Their way was before me as the uncleanness of a removed woman. Wherefore I poured my fury upon them for the blood that they had shed upon the land, and for their idols wherewith they had polluted it. Okay. So, like I've already said, this is again just further proof to show you that the land was polluted / defiled before we went in, and it was polluted / defiled while we were in it. Not only was the promised land polluted, but according to the scriptures, the whole earth is defiled. This is proven in Isaiah chapter 24, verse 5. So let's go there. So now we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 24. Alright, Isaiah chapter 24, verse 5, it reads, The earth also is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. So what this is saying is, not only is America a polluted / defiled land, not only was the promised land polluted / defiled, but the whole earth is defiled. So everywhere, the whole world, it's all polluted, it's all defiled. That's what it's saying in verse 5 of Isaiah chapter 24. Now, despite the fact that the land was polluted before we entered in, and also while we were there were still Hebrews that kept the law in the land despite it getting polluted. This is proven in 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 23, and 2 Kings chapter 18, verses 1 through 7, and 2 Kings chapter 21, verses 1 through 6, and 2 Kings chapter 22, verse 1 through 2. So let's first start off by going to 2 Kings chapter 17. And what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to first start off by proving that there were Hebrews our ancestors, our Hebrew ancestors. There were some that had ended up sinning against Yahweh, committing all types of abominations, and because they committed those abominations, they ended up polluting the land. They ended up defiling the land, and then they went into captivity. But while at the same time, while there were Hebrews that did pollute the land, there were other Hebrews that still kept Yahweh's law in the promised land, even though there were other Hebrews that polluted the land by sinning against Yahweh, by committing abominations, committing a different abominations. So I'm going to read 2 Kings chapter 17, and I'm going to start off at the first verse. In the 12th year of Ahaz king of Judah began Hoshea the son of Elah to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Then the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land, and went up to Samaria, and besieged it 3 years. Now in the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Assyria took Samaria, and carried Israel away into Assyria, and placed them in Halah, and in Habor by the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. For it was so, that the children of Israel had sinned against Yahweh their Elohim, which had brought them up out of the land of Egypt, from under the hand of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and had feared other gods, and walked in the statutes of the heathen, whom Yahweh cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel, which they had made. And the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against Yahweh their Elohim, and they built them high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman to the fenced city. Now, before I continue on, in verse 9, where it says, and the children of Israel did secretly those things that were not right against Yahweh their Elohim, and they built them high places. This is those Hebrew Israelites defiling the promised land. This is them polluting the promised land. They polluted it by building high places, by worshiping false gods and stuff. This is them polluting the land, defiling the land. All right, verse 10. And they set them up images and groves in every high hill and under every green tree. And there they burnt incense in all the high places, and did as did the heathen whom Yahweh carried away before them, and brought wicked things to provoke Yahweh to anger. Again, this is them polluting the land. There are all these abominations, like making graven images and worshiping those images. Verse 12. For they served idols, whereof Yahweh has said unto them, Ye shall not do this thing. Yet Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, Turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent you uh, and which I sent to you by my servants the prophets. Now, before I continue on, notice that Yahweh's saying in verse 13, He has sent all these prophets to these Hebrew Israelites, telling them, hey, turn from your wicked ways. Even though they were in the promised land and they committed all these abominations by polluting the land, which ended up polluting the land, which ended up defiling the land. But yet Yahweh sent His prophets to these Hebrews, telling them, "Hey, I know you defiled the promised land. I know you polluted it, but I still want you to turn. I still want you to return back to me. I still want you to keep my commandments. I still want you to keep my statutes." That's what verse 13 is saying. Continuing on, verse 14. Notwithstanding they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in Yahweh their Elohim. So Yahweh sent His prophets. He sent them to try to get the people to, stop doing evil things and to return back to Him, but they didn't do it at all. And they verse 15, and they rejected His statutes and His covenant that He made with their fathers, and His testimonies which He testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom Yahweh had charged them, that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim, and made them molten images, even 2 calves, and made a grove, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served false deity. And they caused their sons and their daughters to pass through the fire, and used divination and enchantments, and sold themselves to do evil in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke Him to anger. Therefore Yahweh was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Also Judah kept not the commandments of Yahweh their Elohim, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. And Yahweh rejected all the seed of Israel, and afflicted them, and delivered them into the hand of spoilers, until he had cast them out of his sight. For he rent Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam drave Israel from following Yahweh, and made them sin a great sin. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam which he did, they departed not from them, until Yahweh removed Israel out of his sight, as he has said by all his servants the prophets. So was Israel carried away out of their own land to Assyria unto this day. So all these Hebrew Israelites committed all these abominations. They did all these wicked things. They polluted the promised land. They defiled the promised land through their abominations, through their sin, through their wickedness. But even though those Hebrew Israelites defiled the land, as I said earlier, there were still other Hebrews that kept Yahweh's laws while they were in the promised land, even though it ended up getting defiled by other Hebrews who committed all these abominations. And so now I'm going to show you proof of a Hebrew that kept Yahweh's law in the promised land, even though it had gotten defiled. And if you go to 2 Kings chapter 18, I'm going to read verses 1 through 7. I'm going to show you a Hebrew by the name of Hezekiah keeping Yahweh's law in the promised land despite it getting defiled. So if you go to 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 1, it reads, Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name also was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did that which was right in the sight of Yahweh, according to all that David his father did. He removed the high places, and brake the images, and cut down the groves, and brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made. For unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it. And he called it Nehushtan. He trusted in Yahweh Elohim of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor any that were before him. For he clave to Yahweh, and departed not from following him, but kept his commandments, which Yahweh commanded Moses. And Yahweh was with him, and he prospered whithersoever he went forth. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria, and served him not. So, if you'll flip back to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 1, it says, In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years. So, Hoshea was king over Israel, but while Hoshea was king over Israel, Hezekiah was king over Judah. And if you flip back to 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 1, it says, Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, began to reign. Okay? So Hezekiah reigned in the 3rd year that Hoshea was king in Israel. So Hezekiah kept Yahweh's laws, and Yahweh was with Hezekiah. Okay? And Hezekiah, he kept Yahweh's law. He removed the high places. He broke down the images. He trusted in Yahweh, and Yahweh was with him. While at the same time, this other king named Hoshea, which was king over Israel, he was doing all sorts of evil things, as well as the people of Israel. And they ended up getting punished. So these people in Israel, these Hebrew Israelites in Israel, they were doing all types of sin. They were committing all types of abominations, which ended up polluting the land, which ended up defiling the land. But at the same time, you had Hezekiah, this king in Judah, this righteous king. He was doing what was right. He was keeping Yahweh's commandments. He was keeping Yahweh's statutes, even in the promised land, even though the promised land had gotten defiled by Hoshea, which was the king in Israel. Now, I'm going to show you more proof um, of another king keeping the laws and commandments and statutes and all that in the promised land, despite still being getting defiled by another king. So I'm going to go to 2 Kings chapter 21, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 6. So 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 1, it reads, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, after the abominations of the heathen, whom Yahweh cast out before the children of Israel. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for false deity, and made a grove, as did Ahab king of Israel, and worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and served them. And he built altars in the house of Yahweh, of which Yahweh said, In Jerusalem will I put my name. And he built altars for all the hosts of heaven in the two courts of the house of Yahweh. And he made his son pass through the fire, and observed times, and used enchantments, and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. And he wrought much wickedness in the sight of Yahweh, to provoke him to anger. So while Manasseh, he was king, he had been king for 55 years in Jerusalem, and he ended up polluting the land by all his sins, by all his abominations, by all his wickedness. He ended up polluting the promised land. He ended up defiling the promised land. But if you go to 2 Kings chapter 22 and read verses 1 and 2, he'll show you a king that still kept Yahweh's laws and his commandments, even though the promised land had been defiled / polluted. So in 2 Kings chapter 22, verse 1, it reads, Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 30 and 1 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedida, the daughter of Adaiah of Boskoth. And he did that which was right in the sight of Yahweh, and walked in all the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. Now, regarding 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 23, the nation of Israel went into captivity, except for the tribe of Judah. While there were Hebrews in captivity due to them having their children pass through the fire, which resulted in the land being polluted, there were other Hebrews at the same time that were keeping Yah's law, such as Hezekiah of Judah. So if the promised land can be polluted / defiled, but yet there still be Hebrews keeping the law while in the land, then there's no excuse for you to not keep the law here in this polluted / defiled land, which is America. Another excuse that people may use when saying we cannot keep the law in captivity is that they will claim that the law is done away with, according to Lamentations chapter 2, verse 9. So let's go to Lamentations chapter 2, verse 9. So as I stated earlier, people may use the excuse that we cannot keep the law in captivity. Another excuse that people may use when saying we cannot keep the law in captivity is that they will claim that the law is done away with, according to Lamentations chapter 2, verse 9. However, if you read the entire book of Lamentations, but specifically chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, you will understand that when it says the law is no more, that it is saying that the law is no more in the promised land, because we are no longer in the promised land, and therefore we can keep the law in the promised land for the time being, but we have to keep it in captivity instead. So I want to first start by reading verse 9 of chapter 2 in Lamentations. This is the verse that people will use to say that we can't keep the law here in America because the law is no more. So in Lamentations chapter 2 verse 9 it says, her gates are sunk into the ground, he hath destroyed and broken her bars, her king and her princes are among the Gentiles, the law is no more, her prophets also find no vision from Yahweh. So people will use this verse and say, when it says the law is no more, oh, that means that the law is no more anywhere in the world. So we can't keep the law here in America because the law is no more. Well, that's not what that means. That's not what that is saying. And I'm going to prove that. If you read all of Lamentations, but specifically chapter 2, verses 1 through 9, you'll get an understanding of what this is really saying. And what this is really saying is that the law is no more in Jerusalem because we are not there in Jerusalem. So let's start off in chapter 2, and we're going to read verses 1 through 9. So Lamentation chapter 2, verse 1, it reads, how hath Yahweh covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud in his anger, and cast down from heaven unto the earth the beauty of Israel, and remember not his footstool in the day of his anger. Yahweh hath swallowed up all the habitations of Jacob, and have not pitied. He hath thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He hath brought them down to the ground. He hath polluted the kingdom and the princes thereof. He hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy, and he burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, which devoureth round about. This is talking about what Yahweh did to Jerusalem, what Yahweh did to Israel, but specifically Jerusalem. It's talking about how Yahweh is angry and how he took his anger out on Jerusalem, on the people of Jerusalem. Verse 4, he hath bent his bow like an enemy. He stood with his right hand as an adversary, and slew all that were pleasant to the eye in the tabernacle of the daughter of Zion. He poured out his fury like fire. Yahweh is angry, he's mad at us, and it's talking about what he had did to us in his anger. Verse 5, Yahweh was an enemy. He hath swallowed up Israel. He hath swallowed up all her palaces. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and hath increased in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentations. And he hath violently taken away his tabernacle, as if it were of a garden. He hath destroyed his places of the assembly. Yahweh hath caused the solemn feasts and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion. Notice it didn't say Yahweh has caused his solemn feasts and Sabbaths to be forgotten in America or in Puerto Rico or in Russia. No, it says in Zion, which is Jerusalem, and hath despised in the indignation of his anger the king and the priest. Yahweh hath cast off his altar. He hath abhorred his sanctuary. He hath given up into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. They have made a noise in the house of Yahweh, as in the day of a solemn feast. Yahweh hath proposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He hath stretched out a line. He hath now withdrawn his hand from destroying. Therefore he made the rampart and the wall to lament. They languish together. Her gates are sunk into the ground. He hath destroyed and broken her bars. Her king and her princes are among the Gentiles. The law is no more. Her prophets also find no vision from Yahweh. So Yahweh sent the king of Jerusalem, whoever that may have been at the time, and her princes. He sent them to be slaves among the Gentiles. And the law is no more. No more where? The law is no more in Jerusalem. See, this is all talking about what Yahweh did in Jerusalem, what he did to the Hebrew Israelites, what he did to Israel. He did all these bad things to Israel, and rightfully so, because, we did end up sinning against him. Yahweh did all this bad stuff. And so when it says the law is no more, the law is no more in Jerusalem. The law is no more in the promised land, because we are no longer in the promised land. And therefore we can't keep the law in the promised land because we're not there. Okay. Another excuse that people may use when people say that we can't keep the law in captivity is that they will use Hosea chapter 2 verse 11. So let's go there real quick. Excuse me. Okay, in Hosea chapter 2 verse 11 it reads, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. So for the people out there that say we can't keep Yahweh's law, they'll use this verse right here and say, well, because it says, I will cause all her mirth to cease, or in other words, I will cause her mirth to stop, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and her solemn feasts. It says, they're saying that, well, this verse is saying that Yahweh is going to cause the feast days and the new moons and the solemn feasts to stop. So therefore, we don't have to keep the new moons or the Sabbaths or any of the feast days like the Feast of Trumpets or the Day of Atonement. We can't keep that here in America because Yahweh said that he's going to cause that to stop. But that's not what this is saying, though. Okay? That's not what this verse is saying at all. If you read all of chapter 2, especially verses 17 and 18, you will get a better understanding of what this is really saying. From Hosea chapter 2 verses 9 through 13, it is talking about what Yah was going to do but had not done yet at that time, but eventually did end up doing, just like it talked about in the book of Lamentations. And verses 14 through 23 of Hosea chapter 2, it talks about what Yah had not done yet at that time during Hosea's time, but what Yahweh was going to do and still has not done yet, because these verses are still future prophecies. Verses 9 through 13 were future prophecies that were fulfilled, and verses 14 through 23 are prophecies that have not been fulfilled yet. Zechariah chapter 13 verse 1 through 2, and Isaiah chapter 11 verse 6 through 9, and Isaiah chapter 2 verse 2 through 4 help show that verses 17 and 18, let me say that again. Zechariah chapter 13 verse 1 through 2, and Isaiah chapter 11 verse 6 through 9, and Isaiah chapter 2 verse 2 through 4 help you show that verses 17 through 18 of chapter 2 in Hosea are future prophecies. Lamentations chapter 1 verse 1 through 4, and Lamentations chapter 2 verse 11 through 12, and Lamentations chapter 4 verse 4, and Jeremiah chapter 5 verse 15 through 17, and Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 15 through 16 help to show that verses 9 through 13 of chapter 2 in Hosea were future prophecies that were fulfilled. Okay, so I am going to explain what verse 11 of chapter 2 in Hosea really means. And I'm going to start off with verse 1 of chapter 2. And I'm going to read the entire chapter. I'm going to read from verse 1 all the way to verse 23. And I'm going to prove to you that 11 is not saying what people think that it's saying. Okay? What 11 is really saying is that this here is a future prophecy. Verse 11 is a future prophecy that ended up getting fulfilled. Okay? So, I'm going to start off verse 1 in chapter 2 of Hosea, and it reads, Say ye unto your brethren, Amai, and to your sisters, Ruhamah, plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts, lest I strip her naked, and set her as in the day that she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and slay her with thirst. And I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. For their mother had played the harlot. She have conceived them, she that conceived them have done shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool and my flax, my oil and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up thy way with thorns, and make a wall, that she shall not find her paths. And she shall follow after her lovers, and she shall not overtake them, and she shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then shall she say, I will go and return to my first husband, for then was it better with me than now. For, excuse me, for she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepared for false deity. Now let's stop right here. In verse 8, when it says, For she did not know that I gave her corn, wine, oil, this she is talking about Israel. It's talking about our forefathers. It's talking about Israel. Yahweh gave us corn, and he had given us wine and oil, and he gave us silver and gold. He blessed us with all these things. But instead, we gave our corn and our wine to these different false deities, one being Baal. Okay? Now, continuing on, verse 9. Therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time thereof. Yahweh is going to return back to Jerusalem. He's going to return back to Israel, and he's going to take away the corn that he gave us, that he gave those Hebrew Israelites. Verse 9, Therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and will recover my wool and my flax given to cover her nakedness. Yahweh is going to come back and take what belongs to him. Yahweh gave us all these things. He gave us corn, he gave us wine, he gave us oil. Now he's going to come back and take what belongs to him. He's going to take it away from Israel. Verse 10, And now will I discover her lewdness. This her is Israel now. And now will I discover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. Yahweh is going to do some real bad stuff to Israel, and nobody's going to be able to save Israel. Nobody's going to be able to deliver Israel out of Yahweh's hand. Verse 11, And I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. When Yahweh does end up returning to Jerusalem, he's going to cause all her feast days to stop in Jerusalem. He's going to cause all her new moons to stop in Jerusalem. Is going to cause all Israel's Sabbaths to stop in the promised land. And the way he's going to cause it to stop is by taking them out of the promised land and sending them somewhere else into captivity, which would have been Babylon. And I will destroy her vines and her verse 12. And I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she hath said, These are my rewards that my lovers have given me. And I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. Yahweh was going to destroy all the vines and the fig trees in Jerusalem, in the promised land, in Israel, which he did end up doing. That's what it talks about in the book of Lamentations. And I will visit upon her the days of false deity, wherein she burnt incense to them, and she decked herself with earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers, and forgat me, saith Yahweh. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, and bring her into the wilderness, and speak comfortably unto her. Now, so from verses 1 of chapter 2, in Hosea chapter 2, from verse 1 all the way to verse 13, he's pretty much talking about what Yahweh was going to end up doing to Israel, what he was going to end up doing to Jerusalem. But specifically, it's really from verse 9 through 13, it's talking about what Yahweh was going to do, but had not yet done at that time, but eventually did end up doing, just like what it talked about in the book of Lamentations. So when you read from verse 9 all the way to verse 13 of chapter 2 in Hosea, it's just talking about what Yahweh was going to end up doing to the people in Israel, but more specifically to the people in Jerusalem. And he did end up doing that. He ended up destroying Jerusalem. He ended up taking the people out of Jerusalem and sending them into captivity. So from verse 9 through verse 13, this was a future prophecy that eventually ended up being fulfilled. Okay, so when you see in verse 11 where it says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. Notice that in verse 11 it says, I will also cause. That means that he is going to do something, that he is going to cause all her mirth to cease. Okay, so that means he hadn't done it just yet, but was going to end up doing it. And again, he eventually did end up doing it, which is why if you read the book of Lamentations, it talks about how Yahweh ended up doing all this type of destruction, towards Jerusalem. He ended up accomplishing what he had said in Hosea chapter 2, verses 9 through 13. Okay, so Yahweh ended up fulfilling that prophecy that he had made in Hosea chapter 2, verses 9 through 13. Okay. Now, so again, verse 9 through 13 was a future prophecy that eventually ended up getting fulfilled. And verses 14 all the way to 23 is a future prophecy that has not been fulfilled yet. So now let me start reading verse 14 of Hosea chapter 2. So verse 14 it reads, Therefore, behold, I will allure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. And I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope, and she shall sing there as in the days of her youth, and as in the day when she came up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be at that day, saith Yahweh, that thou shalt call me Ishai, and shalt call me no more Baali. For I will take away the names of false deity out of her mouth, and they shall no more be remembered by their name. Again, this is a future prophecy right here. It says in verse 17, For I will take away the names of false deity. This is what Yahweh is going to do in the future. He hasn't taken away the names yet, but eventually Yahweh will. And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground, and I will break the bow and the sword and the and the battle out of the earth, and I will make them to lie down safely. Verse 18 is another future prophecy. I'll read verse 18 again. It says, "And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of the heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth, and will make them to lie down safely." Who is that them? That them is Israel. Is going to make Israel lie down safely in the future. "And I will betroth thee unto me forever." Again, this is a future prophecy. This ain't happened yet. Yahweh is going to betroth Israel forever. "And I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, and in judgment, and in loving kindness, and in mercies. I will even betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know, Yahweh. And it shall come to pass in that day, I will hear, saith Yahweh, I will hear the heavens, and they shall hear the earth, and the earth shall hear the corn, and the wine, and the oil, and they shall hear Jezreel. And I will sow her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy, and I will say to them which were not my people, Thou art my people, and they shall say, Thou art my Elohim. Once again, all of this from verse 14 all the way to verse 23 of chapter 2 in Hosea, all of this is a future prophecy that has not been fulfilled yet. But verses 9 through 13 of chapter 2 in Hosea, that was a future prophecy that did end up getting fulfilled. Okay, and I'm going to prove that as well. I'm going to provide further evidence of that. So if you'll go to Zechariah chapter 13, I'm going to go to Zechariah chapter 13. Oh, excuse me. And I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. And I'm going to show that in verses 17 and 18 in Hosea chapter 2, that these are future prophecies. In Hosea chapter 2, verse 17 and 18, those two are future prophecies. I'm going to prove that they are future prophecies by going to Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. And in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1, it reads, In that day there shall be a fountain open to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. And I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. So if you hold that page right there, if you hold Zechariah chapter 13, and then switch right back to Hosea chapter 2 and read verse 17, for I will take away the names of false deity out of her mouth. Switch over it, and it says in verse 2, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land. So over here in Hosea chapter 2 it says, for I will take away the names of false deity out of her mouth. And then over here it says that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land. So again, this is just further proof to show to you that here in verse 17 in Hosea, this is a future prophecy that Yahweh was going to that he's going to end up eventually doing, but has not done yet. As it states in Zechariah chapter 13, verse 2, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land, and they shall no more be remembered. Okay? Eventually, there's going to be a time where nobody ever remembers the names of JC, or the name of the Muslim god, or the name of the Hindu god, or whatever. Eventually, nobody's going to remember any of those names. Eventually. But that day has not happened yet, so that's the future prophecy. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Isaiah chapter 11. And I'm going to prove to you that in Hosea chapter 2 verse 18 that also is a future prophecy that's dealing with Isaiah chapter 11. So we're going to go to Isaiah chapter 11 and we're going to read verses 6 through 9. Now if you'll hold page Hosea chapter 2 verse 18, let me go ahead and read verse 18 again real quick. And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beast of the field, and with the fowls of heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. Okay. If you hold that right there and then turn to Isaiah chapter 11 verse 6, it reads, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them, and the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. So, in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 6 through 9, this is a future prophecy, obviously, and because this has not happened yet. Then you switch right over to verse 18 in chapter 2 of Hosea. It says, and in that day I will make a covenant, and a covenant is an agreement for them with the beast of the field. This covenant sounds like it's dealing with the beast that's talking about here in Isaiah verse 6 through 9. So when it says in that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, to me what this is saying is that in that day there's going to be a day that Yahweh is going to make an agreement with Israel regarding the beast of the field. And I wonder what that agreement is. Could it possibly be that the wolf is going to dwell with the lamb? Could that agreement possibly be that the cow is going to feed alongside the bear? Could that agreement be that the child is going to play around with the snake and the snake is not going to end up biting the child? Could that possibly be the agreement that Yahweh is talking about in verse 18 when it says, and in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beast of the field and with the fowls of the heaven and with the creeping things of the ground? I'm pretty sure that's what the covenant is talking about. I'm pretty sure that is that covenant right there that's being talked about here in Isaiah chapter 11 verse 6 through 9. So in Hosea chapter 2 verse 18, this here is further proof that this is a future prophecy that has not happened yet. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go to Lamentations. I'm going to go to Lamentations chapter 1. And I am going to prove to you that in Hosea chapter 2, verses 9 through 13, that these were future prophecies that eventually did end up being fulfilled. So if you go to Leviticus chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, it reads, how do the city sit solitary that was full of people? How is she become a widow? She that was great among the nations and princess among the provinces, how is she become tributary? She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she hath none to comfort her. All her friends have done treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen, she findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate, her priests sigh, her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Now, if you hold this page right here in Lamentations chapter 1, and then quickly go back to Hosea chapter 2, and if you go down here to verse 11 again, it says, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts. Then you switch right back over here and you read what it says in verse 4. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feast. I wonder why nobody's coming to the solemn feast. Oh, I know the reason why. It's because Yahweh stopped. He caused the solemn feasts to cease. He stopped those solemn feasts. Why did he stop those solemn feasts? It's because Israel sinned against Yahweh. Okay? That's why when it says in verse 11, I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast days, her new moons, and her Sabbaths, and all her solemn feasts, is because over here in Lamentations, verse 4 of chapter 1, the ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feast. The reason why nobody's coming to the solemn feast is because Yahweh stopped those solemn feasts. He stopped it by destroying Jerusalem. He stopped it by taking the people out of Jerusalem and sending them into captivity. Okay? So, verse 11 of chapter 2 of Hosea, that was a future prophecy that eventually ended up getting fulfilled, and it got fulfilled in the book of Lamentations. That's what the book of Lamentations is talking about. It's talking about what Yahweh did to his people, to the Hebrews, to the Israelites. Okay. So when you read verse 11, you can't say that, oh, well, because it says Yahweh caused the solemn feast days to stop, therefore we don't have to keep the feast days and the new moons and the Sabbaths here in America. No, that's not what that's saying at all. What this is saying is that you can't keep the solemn feast in Jerusalem because you're not there in Jerusalem no more. You're not there in the promised land. And so therefore you have to keep the Sabbath days, the feast days here in America in captivity instead. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Lamentations chapter 2, and I'm going to read verses 11 and 12. Alright, Lamentations chapter 2, verse 11. My eyes do fill with tears, my bowels are troubled, my liver is poured upon the earth for the destruction of the daughter of my people, because the children and the sucklings swoon in the streets of the city. They say to their mothers, where is the corn and wine? When they swoon as the wounded in the streets of the city, when their soul was poured out into their mother's bosom. Now, if you hold that page and again go right back to Hosea chapter 2, we're going to go to verse 8, and it says, for she did not know that I gave her corn and wine and oil, and multiplied her silver and gold, which they prepare for false deity. Therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and recover my wool and my flax, given to cover her nakedness. Now switch right on back in Lamentations chapter 2, and we'll go to verse 12 where it says, they say to their mothers, where is the corn and wine? This sounds awfully similar to what it's talking about here in Hosea chapter 2 verse 9. It says, therefore will I return and take away my corn in the time of thereof. Yahweh did end up returning, and he took away his corn. Yahweh took away the corn from the Hebrews. That's the reason why it's asking this question in verse 12 of Lamentations chapter 2. They say to their mothers, where's the corn at? Mom, where's the corn at? Well, the corn's been taken away. It was taken away by who? By Yahweh. Because as it says in verse 9 of Hosea chapter 2, Yahweh, therefore will I return. Yahweh is going to return and take away his corn, my corn, the time thereof. And he did end up returning, and he did end up taking away his corn from the Hebrews. That's the reason why they're asking this question here in verse 12 of chapter 2. Where is the corn and the wine? Because the corn was taken away by Yahweh. Okay? So once again, verse 9 of chapter 2 in Hosea, this was a future prophecy that eventually was fulfilled, and it was fulfilled here in Lamentations chapter 2, verse 11 and 12. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Lamentations chapter 4, verse 4. Okay, in Lamentations chapter 4, verse 4, it reads, The tongue of the sucking child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children as bread, and no man breaketh it unto them. Again, this is another future prophecy that had been fulfilled, which is what it talked about, which was talked about in Hosea chapter 2, verses 9 through 12. And if you hold that page and go right back to Hosea chapter 2, and if you go down to verse 12, it says, I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she hath said, These are my rewards that my lovers have given me, and I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. So if you go right back to Lamentations chapter 4, verse 4, says, The tongue of the sucking child cleaveth to the roof of his mouth for thirst. The young children ask bread, and no man breaketh it. Why is no man able to give bread to his children? It's because Yahweh ended up taking away his corn that he had talked about in Hosea. And not only did he take away the corn, he took away the wine as well. So they can't drink, and they can't drink anything, and they can't eat anything, because Yahweh ended up returning and taking away his corn and his wine and the oil. He ended up returning and ended up punishing those Hebrews that had sinned against him for breaking his laws. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 5. And I'm going to go to verse 15 and 17. For just further proof to show to you that, once again, in Hosea chapter 2, this is a future prophecy that ended up being fulfilled eventually. From verse 9 all the way to verse 13, that was a future prophecy that eventually ended up being fulfilled. And I'm going to go to Jeremiah chapter 5, verses 15 through 17 to show that. So in Jeremiah chapter 5, verse 15, it reads, Lo, I will bring a nation upon you from far, O house of Israel, saith Yahweh. It is a mighty nation, it is an ancient nation, a nation whose language thou knowest not, neither understandest what they say. Their quiver is as an open tree. They are almighty men, and they shall eat up thy harvest and thy bread, which thy sons and thy daughters should eat. They shall eat up thy flocks and thy herds. They shall eat up thy vines and thy fig trees. They shall impoverish thy fenced cities, wherein thou trustest, with the sword. So if you hold that page right there, and then go right back to Hosea chapter 2, and if you go to verse 12, it says, I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, whereof she hath said, These are my rewards that my lovers have given me, and I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. So in verse 12 it says, I will destroy her vines and her fig trees. And if you switch right back over to Jeremiah chapter 5, in verse 17 it says, And they shall eat up thy harvest and thy bread, which thy sons and thy daughters should eat. They shall eat up thy flocks and thy herds. They shall eat up thy vines and thy fig trees. Huh, interesting. It says, they shall eat up thy vines and thy fig trees. And you switch back over here, it says, I will destroy her vines and her fig trees. So, when it says right here in verse 12, I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, this is a future prophecy saying that this is what Yahweh is going to end up doing to Israel. He's going to destroy her vines and her fig trees. And the way Yahweh is going to destroy her vines and her fig trees is by sending an ancient nation to Israel, to Jerusalem, and those Babylonians are going to eat up their vines. They're going to eat up those fig trees, as it states here. They shall eat up thy vines and thy fig trees. So once again, further proof to show to you that this was a future prophecy that did end up being fulfilled. And I want to show another testimony of that. Another example. We're going to go to Jeremiah chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 15 through 16. So Jeremiah chapter 1 verse 15, and reads, For, lo, I will call all the families of the kingdoms of the north, saith Yahweh, and they shall come, and they shall set every one his throne at the entering of the gates of Jerusalem, and against all the walls thereof round about, and against all the cities of Judah. And I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands. Okay, now if you switch right back over to Hosea chapter 2 and go to verse 13, verse 13 reads, I will visit upon her the days of false deity, wherein she burnt incense to them, and she decked herself with her earrings and her jewels, and she went after her lovers, and forgat me, saith Yahweh. And if you switch right back to verse 16 of Jeremiah chapter 1, it says, I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands. So over here in Hosea, it says, I will visit upon her the days of false deity, wherein she burned incense to them. And then over here it says, who have forsaken me and have burned incense unto other gods. Seems sort of similar, doesn't it? Once, I know I've said it a million times, but I'll say it again. In verse 13 right here, this was a future prophecy that Yahweh talked about that eventually did end up being fulfilled. And Yahweh fulfilled that prophecy right here where he talked about in Jeremiah. I'll read that verse again. Chapter 1 verse 16, and I will utter my judgments against them, touching all their wickedness, who have forsaken me, and have burnt incense unto other gods, and worshipped the works of their own hands. Now 16, that this particular verse, this is also a future prophecy, but again, the prophecy was fulfilled in the book of Lamentation. So when you read the book of Lamentation, all that was prophecy that was fulfilled were talked about here in Hosea chapter 2 verses 9 through 13. The reason how I know that all these were future prophecies is because Hosea came before Jeremiah and Zechariah. This is proven in Hosea chapter 1 verse 1 through 2. Now keep in mind, excuse me, Hosea came before the prophet Jeremiah and Zechariah. So if you go to Hosea chapter 1 verse 1 through 2, it reads, The word of Yahweh that came unto Hoshea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. The beginning of the word of Yahweh by Hosea. And Yahweh said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms, and the children of whoredoms, for the land have committed great whoredom, departed from Yahweh. And if you go to Jeremiah, again, I'm just trying to prove that Hosea came before Jeremiah did. If you go to Hosea, I'm sorry, if you go to Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, it reads, the words of Jeremiah the son of Hilkiah, of the priests that were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of Yahweh came in the days of Josiah the son of Ammon king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah king of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah the son of Josiah king of Judah, unto the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. Okay. And if you'll last go to Zechariah, again, just further proving that Hosea came before Zechariah and Jeremiah. So in Zechariah chapter 1, verse 1, it reads, in the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of Yahweh unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo, the prophet, saying, okay then. So just one last point on that, Hosea chapter 2, verse 11. When somebody comes